So this is the iceberg, the anxiety iceberg. And what this basically helps us to understand is for the behaviors that we see, is helping us to understand what is going on underneath. So when people experience anxiety, and especially if they have an anxiety disorder, you may see things like anger, they may have sleep issues, they may be over planning. You wonder why are they paying so much detail to this small thing, you know, or why there is an avoidance. You know, how comes they're always avoiding things, avoiding conflict, avoiding courageous conversations, avoiding having to address and deal with things? Or if they have this kind of negativity and they're always thinking about things from a negative point of view or what's going to go wrong. Or if they have a lack of focus, because if you imagine the slide that we just looked at and someone's experiencing all of these problems and the headaches and the migraines and they can't focus and the fogginess and all of this other stuff going on, the stabbing pains, it's going to be very hard for them to focus. And then what can sometimes be seen as defiance, you think that they're just not playing ball, they're not communicating, they're not doing the things that they need to do. Or chandlering, which is basically when people have outbursts that are so out of proportion to the situation that's currently going on. So all of those things that's happening on the outside, which is observable behaviors, but they're a reflection of the feelings and what's going on inside, where people feel helpless, insecure, where they're uncomfortable, where they've got grief, you know, loneliness, where they're offended, where they feel disrespected by things that's happened. They don't know how to address it because they're too fearful to address it, where they just feel stuck between a rock and a hard place, when depression seeps in, where they feel overwhelmed and ashamed and embarrassed because they feel a certain way. So all of that is what's going on underneath the iceberg, that often the person, the mask that they're carrying, we don't really get to understand and realize that's what's really going on behind all of that. And it's only when we take time to explore and show and support that we can get to that. And so it can be quite difficult for the person who is experiencing anxiety, because then that means that they have to be vulnerable. They have to show you or talk about what's really going on for them. And that can be difficult because they may have done it to someone in the past and it got thrown back at them. So it's really important that we are aware of this, especially if you're supporting someone who has anxiety. It's important to be really aware of that. Is there a fine line between anxiety and stress, or does anxiety cause stress? Well, it's a good question. So you can be stressed. Okay, so let's look at this. Stress in itself, okay, just like anxiety in itself, is not a bad thing. So for example, if I know I've got an interview, okay, and I want to get this job, I would experience some stress. But that stress is good because it's going to make me focus. It's going to make me do my research. It's going to make me, when I go into that session, be in focused and in tuned for that interview process. Okay. Now they say that there's an optimum level of stress. Okay. If we don't have any stress in our work or in our life, then we become bored. There's no interest in it, right? So we do need a certain level of stress to be at our optimal best. Okay. But it's when we stay or go over that level that stress can lead to burnout. And it's kind of like the same with anxiety. With anxiety, it's okay if we do experience some anxiety at certain periods of time. So for example, say if this was the first webinar I was ever doing, I would be anxious. There's nothing wrong with that, but that would help me to be focused and to make sure I'm doing this right, etc., etc. But if after the webinar, I'm just consumed about and worried about if people liked it, what they're going to say, how they're going to look at me next time, that's when it becomes unmanageable. So in both sides, you can have one without the other, or you can have them overlapping. And you can have them working in harmony. So you might feel stressed and a bit of anxious while you're doing that particular task and it goes down. Or you can have both of them going above the normal. And that's when we experience burnout and or anxiety, which can then lead to various other issues, which we're going to look at some of them a bit later.